if we are under any illusions that a transition, an energy transition in the world will require less material things, please, let's stop being delusional. It actually requires so much more in minerals, so much more in metals than has actually been extracted so far. So this is again another issue that I think the AP, the Pacific Alliance, could take up. And again, I think there is always a pressure between the reality and the idealism. And I think, yes, governments either from the center right or from the center left. By the way, I don't think things in Colombia are that well, predetermined. Actually are in a good place. The center right in Latin America is also changing, right? It's not the center right of the time of Fujimori or Menem or so on, or Salinas. It has changed, and I think it will also be thinking about these issues as well. So thank you.
Thank you both. I loved your responses to the question, and on this idea of the polarized world, I think that's something that concerns a lot of us, and I think Canada actually has a big piece in that part as well as a hemispheric partner, and looking at our trade sort of makeup across the Americas. Really, it will be the challenge for the next decade for sure. So I'm gonna allow some questions, Ambassador. If you can please introduce yourselves when you ask your question.
Hello, Raúl Fernández, Ambassador of Chile. Congratulations for the comments and do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, first comments that I would like to raise is in regard with the European Union and Canada trade agreement. No? You talk that the European companies are working much better than the Canadian, no? And I think that is a very good and positive outcome, because the challenge today is the ratification of the agreement in Europe. And if you have a positive outcome in the European company, you can show that that is good. This agreement has been very good for both sides. No? Second, I want to raise the fact that the Pacific Alliance is a rule-based order architecture that we have built. And today that there are a lot of uncertainty. Well, the Pacific Alliance have focused in some very concrete things that have been very positive for our countries. No? Mobility, roaming, well, investment. You have to see what happening with our stock exchange relationship. That is a very good step. And you have not taken in consideration another fact, that is that Ecuador will join us. That is very important. It's our neighbor. We have the same idea and criteria as Ecuador. And also the association with Singapore. Why I talk about Singapore? Because we have to remind that the CPTPP start as G3. Singapore, Brunei, and Chile. Then US join us, and today is CPTPP. That means that the fact that Singapore is joining us as associated is a very important step to see to the future. And in regard with the extractive industry, I don't have any problem when you have a discussion about what is the economic framework, because that is a democratic discussion. No? I don't see any problem in the future with the investment that Canada has in that sector, at least in Chile. You have done a very good role, and the standard that you have are the standard that we require. Then I see very good perspective. Thank you.
Question? Thank you. My name is Roberto Rodriguez, Ambassador of Peru to Canada. First of all, I'd like to thank my Mexican colleague for having this wonderful initiative in having you to discuss the Pacific Alliance, and I thank you for all the thoughts and ideas that you have shared with us. Complementing what my colleague from Chile has said, I like to remind everybody that actually the Pacific Alliance is a mechanism of deep integration in four main issues: services, goods, person, and financial services. So it is important, and right now, in the case of Peru, we are fully committed to Pacific Alliance. We consider it as a very important tool to project the importance of free trade. Free trade for our countries. Peru as a high middle income country is very important because we need foreign investment. And foreign investment is the main driving force to create employment. And with the generation of employment, we are able to fight poverty. That's the first step. The big challenge that we have right now within the Pacific Alliance is because we always talk about economic development. But we have to translate economic development in social development. And our main targets right now is to close the gap that we have in health, education, sanitation, housing, and so on. And all these big problems that we're still facing were deepened during this pandemic. So we have a lot of work ahead of us, and but I wanted to just underscore this. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Monica Beltran. I am the Deputy Chief of Mission of the Embassy of Colombia. I just want to bounce back to something that both ambassadors have mentioned related to social development. And I want to touch base, especially on gender approach. As you mentioned, the Pacific Alliance observers have made some requirements regarding some challenging topics for all of the countries. However, the recent invitation of Canada to Peru and Colombia to join the Global Trade Inclusive Group and the ITAC, I believe that shows that our countries have done some special efforts on this particular topic. However, and this is personal opinion, I think we need to do more, because social development cannot be reached with more inclusion. We had yesterday a panel on feminist foreign policy. Actually, Mexico was the leader of this topic in the region. It's the only country that has done more progress on that. But we need to do more. We women are 49.5% of the global population, and we are literally subrepresented in every single political space of decisions. Having said that, Colombia particularly has done interesting progress with the Presidential Commission for the Gender Equality. I understand that all those countries in the Pacific Alliance have been working on that as well. But I would like to know, I'm sorry, Paulo Meredith, point of view on how this ITAG and GTAG approach can actually make us closer, because the position of observer of Canada, it's in progress, as Adriana said, but I want to touch base, especially on that topic.
Yeah, just an open invitation to react to what you've heard.
Okay, maybe I'll work my way backwards and start with the gender question. So you know, Canada's first gender chapter was with Chile, and in any trade agreement, and I think it was a good start. And I hesitate to ever be critical on this, because I do think that some effort and some attention is better than none. But it is important to bear in mind that in this 9-page chapter, it actually only has 2 binding commitments. One is that we'll have a meeting, and the other is that we'll report on what happened at that meeting. That is all that's actually required in the chapter. So we have to do better, right? It can't, and one of the concerns that I have about so much attention to the talk around this is that in the kind of Twitter universe, that's all that anyone has attention for. And so it's, oh, we're talking about women, we're listening to women, this is all good, and then we turn the page and say, okay, now let's get back to the files that matter. And so I think if we're going to talk about it, we better deliver, and we need, and I in no way want to criticize that this first chapter was done, because it's there, it's something to build on, but we have to do better. I'm not expert on the latest and what's happening in the Gender and Trade Initiative, so I don't want to speak for the government, certainly, in this area, but I think that putting more teeth to these things would be important. So, just one example that I think is the kind of way that we could take chapters from aspirational language to things that might actually move the needle for women is things like in our labor mobility agreements to put some quota around this. I don't like to talk about people like quota, but if you look, for instance, at the number of high-skilled workers coming to Canada from